FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
We are back on the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Really pleased to have Ivan Eland with us. You know him well. Been here many times before. Senior Fellow and Director of the Center on Peace and Liberty at the Independent Institute. Dr. Eland, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Kerry.
Hey, so we're talking about Bo Bergdahl and the whole exchange that went down to bring him back to America. Many people upset over it. What's your take?
Well, I think we can overstate the importance of this, but certainly there are issues that have been raised. It's probably not a very good deal to let out 5 senior Taliban guys who are probably pretty ruthless. I think they're probably the most ruthless people still held in Guantanamo. And what do they get in return? They got a guy, who walked off the job. So now you can make an argument for not doing that. Or if we are really going to get out of Afghanistan in 2016, that is, take everybody out and the war is over, then you really don't have any excuse to hold those guys anyway. So, and they're less of a threat, of course, because they're not Al-Qaeda, they're Taliban. And their Taliban mainly fights U.S. occupation in Afghanistan. So, you could argue that they were going to be released anyway, but the problem is they have to stay in Qatar for a year, and we're still going to have soldiers there until 2016 when they're all supposed to be gone. If this were hey, let's wrap it up and call it a day for the war, that'd be one thing, because at the end of wars, no matter who's fighting, usually it's customary to release prisoners on both sides. So that would have been a better excuse for a lopsided deal as well. We're holding 5 of them and they're only holding 1 of ours, so let's just call it a day, end the war, and go home. Now, if they had done that's one thing, I think. But what we have here is these guys have to stay in Qatar for a year under very loose rules. They're not put in jail or anything, and they can walk around on the streets and blah, 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 and they can get in contact with their buddies at home. They can raise money, fundraise, which is probably what they would really do while they're there. And then, of course, they can go back to the battlefield in plenty of time to show up against the U.S. before they leave again. Although by the end of this year, most of our forces will be confined to bases. But of course, that still doesn't necessarily mean these guys can't, raise some trouble. So there are many troubling aspects to it, including the fact that it would have been very easy for them to consult Congress. They only have to consult 8 people, the Gang of 8. These are chairmen of committees like Armed Services and Intelligence on both houses, both Democrats and Republicans. And if they would have consulted, it's sort of a pro forma consultation, really, because these guys can't really do anything about it. They're held to secrecy that this exchange is going to come about, but Obama made a mistake by not doing that, a political mistake, which he should have done that. It's really no cost to him, even if they disagree with doing it. And I think that's what he was scared about, because this has been suggested for a number of years, and people like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff have said that they weren't in favor of it, that sort of thing. So Admiral Mullen, who's now retired, he was against it, and he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So there was liable to be some pushback, and I think that's why Obama didn't do it. But it was a politically dumb move on his part.
Hey, what are the troops out in the field? What do they think of this? And then you have the veterans, administration scandal breaking, and then you had the administration and Congress cutting back on their benefits. I mean, it's got to be pretty demoralizing for their efforts, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that's true. The two do coincide. I think, the guys who are in his unit may have some animosity toward the whole thing, because since he had a tendency, apparently, if the rumors are correct, and I think we have, we have to caveat this, because there hasn't really been an investigation I don't like to try people in the media because we don't really know what happens. We've already seen some exaggerations, like he was helping the Taliban or trying to get in the Taliban, and that's already sort of proven to be true, that to be false. There was radio transmission that he was trying to find somebody who spoke English, but I don't really think anybody's established that he was trying to help the enemy. And in fact, they kept him in a cage, apparently, according to him. And now, of course, he is at fault for wandering off the battlefield. He was sworn to do a job, and I understand why the people in his unit were mad at him, because they did have to probably risk their lives, and they say that some people have died doing that. But of course, perhaps they should also blame their military hierarchy in that they didn't really have to make the decision to go look for him very hard after he was wandered off. So I'm not sure he should be blamed for the killing of the U.S. soldiers looking for him, if there were in fact soldiers killed. But certainly he can be blamed for walking off the job and, perhaps endangering the soldiers. But again, the military hierarchy really didn't have to look for him that hard if they didn't want to. So I think we have to have this investigated and see who's really to blame for what. But anyway, I think it was probably overall a bad deal, simply because you're not ending the war at this point. These guys may be back on the battlefield, and it was a pretty one-sided transaction.
And the administration evidently thought that there was going to be jubilation in the streets, that America was going to be overjoyed to get back their last POW being held. What kind of calculation do you think went into this, so that they could even imagine that this was going to be the case?
Well, I think they're getting more of a protest than they thought they would. I'm not sure they thought of jubilation. Sometimes presidents in their second term, have to do stuff. And I think one of the factors that we haven't yet mentioned is that Obama has been trying to close Guantanamo Bay and bringing some of those prisoners and putting them in maximum security U.S. facilities, or sending most of them overseas to countries that will take them. But the Congress has made a law saying that there can't be any transfers unless Congress is notified. And of course, Congress wasn't notified in this particular instance. But I think this may be one way to clear out Guantanamo, since these were apparently 5 of the worst people that are being held there. So if you don't have these guys there, then of course that may take some of the curiously, it may take some of the arguments away from not closing Guantanamo and distributing the prisoners elsewhere.
Yeah. Do you think closing Gitmo is inevitable now?
Well, nothing is inevitable, but I think eventually it's probably going to have to close, because it doesn't square very well with the American system of justice. It was created by George Bush to evade that justice system and the Geneva Conventions, and they did that, and now they're sort of caught with it. But there's some categories of prisoners there that they can't probably have enough evidence to try them successfully. But on the other hand, they're afraid to let them out. So what do? Well, you basically have to either try them or ultimately release them. We deal with threats of bad people all the time, and it's not a good idea to put people back on the street that are a potential threat. But on the other hand, it's not a good idea to have such a flagrant violation of the American justice system either. And that's probably worse than these 1 or 2 guys that might be released. Most of them will probably go to foreign countries. Some of them will be held in the U.S. because they can try them in maximum security prisons. And that's just sort of demagoguery that they're going to escape and run around and kill people. I mean, these prisons are really much better probably than even Guantanamo is.
Yeah, well, what do you do with bin Laden's bodyguard or limo driver? What do you do with his doctor? I mean, maybe you don't have enough evidence.
We're outraged by the fact that they helped this guy, but I'm not sure that his driver or his doctor are top line. I think these 5 Taliban guys are probably much worse, because they're senior Taliban people. They're very radical, and they're smart guys because they've been in the insurgency before fighting the U.S., and the U.S. managed to grab them, and they're probably worse than bin Laden's driver. Now, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the guy who allegedly, he claims that he masterminded the 9/11 attacks, he's a different story. I think he would be a threat, but I think they probably have enough evidence to try him in criminal court. So I'm not sure, and I think that would be the best thing to do. Rather than to do it in a military tribunal, because these military tribunals are flagrantly unconstitutional. They're not recognized around the world. I think you have to try them in a legitimate court proceeding, convict them, and then mete out the punishment to them. That's the worst thing he could get, is the legitimacy of that coming back to pay for what he did.
Do you want to do that in Lower Manhattan, though?
Well, you got to do it wherever you got to do it. And just because they don't want a trial there, that's, justice is justice. And I think why not? It would be probably the best place to do it. That's where he did his act of, and I would think that people would want to punish him there. But, there's political pushback, I guess. But he's got to be tried somewhere. And if he can't get a fair trial in Lower Manhattan, which the defense could probably argue, they could move it to somewhere else, and that's probably what they would have to do anyway. But I think it's better to show that the American system works and that we don't have to rely on kangaroo courts. And these military tribunals are very questionable as to whether they provide for a true fair trial, because you've got a military. All the people work for the president that are sitting on there, the judge and the jury, and that sort of thing, and the prosecutors and the defense attorneys, more or less. At least some of the defense attorneys work for the military as well, and they don't have the same rules of evidence. They can, and it's very. Obama has improved on it from what Bush had, but there's still kangaroo courts, and they're unconstitutional. They were unconstitutional when Lincoln did it in the Civil War, and we're not in a battleground where the regular courts don't work, and that's really the standard that you should use. And there have been the civilian courts have a much better record of convicting terrorists than the military tribunals. I think the military tribunals haven't done very well at all in convicting these people, and the civilian courts have convicted. They've had trials where secret information was involved. It was a public trial, but they had to close some of the sessions. They had really bad terrorists tried. They had to have really good security. And the civilian court system has actually proved itself to be very, very competent in these matters, much more competent than the military tribunal system.
Well, more on this when we continue on the Financial Survival Network.
FSN Radio.
Do you have Medicare or health insurance through your employer? If so, listen up. The healthcare reform wasn't written to save the healthcare industry or even to lower healthcare costs. Shoot, it isn't even designed to insure the uninsured. It's just a temporary political byproduct. Like a flat rock you step on in a swiftly moving stream, Obamacare is just a means to an end. Want to learn more about Obama's ultimate objective? Then you'll want to review our latest research presentation found on oclies.com. In it, a health expert and industry insider explains what you think you know about caring for your health is about to drastically change in 2014. Plus, he details the simple steps you could take to save thousands of dollars per year in health costs. It's free for you to preview at oclies.com. Don't waste time. What you don't know about the healthcare reform could hurt you and your family.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
We're back. We're with Dr. Ivan Eland, and we're talking about closing Gitmo and the recent POW swap. Well, Dr. Eland, I mean, we've used these military tribunals in many wars past. I mean, look, we're in the country's at war, and, at least some type of war. I don't know exactly legally how it fits. And, we've used them in World War I, World War II, been used throughout history, and they're as constitutional as any other form of tribunal. So you can't say that the guy's not getting a fair trial, because you said that the civilian system has convicted many times where the military tribunals haven't. They seem to be more expedited and can get these things through, but they've been tied in knots by the civilian judiciary. Why is it you believe they're not they're not constitutional when these are foreign combatants. Why are they entitled to constitutional protections under the U.S. Constitution?
They're not necessarily, but if you want to say we're at war, then you need to you need to give them all the benefits of the Geneva Convention. The Guantanamo was set up so that they could avoid the Geneva Convention on the one hand, which Geneva Convention is set up to, you can hold prisoners without trial, but when the war is over, you got to let them out, right? But if you want to treat them as criminals, which a lot of these people aren't criminals because they picked them up on the battlefield. If they picked them up on the battlefield, now Khalid Sheikh Mohammed committed a crime, and that's why he should be tried in a civilian court. But these military tribunals are being held up by the civilian courts because they're unconstitutional. The Constitution says that you will have a trial by jury. It doesn't say anything about military tribunals. The only exception to that, curiously, is in the U.S. Armed Forces. If somebody does something wrong, you get a court-martial. That's a court-martial. But a court-martial is much different and much fairer than these military tribunals. These military tribunals have no standing in the Constitution, and the rules of evidence are different. The secret testimony, you can have secret testimony against you. Well, I mean, we don't do that in America. It may be military, the reason these are supported is they're called military tribunals because people are in uniform are doing the judging, the jury, the deciding on the jury, the prosecuting, and the defense. But that's not how our system is supposed to work. You don't get a fair trial. All those people report to the president, and if the president wants, the guy to be convicted, they're basically in a limbo because they don't have enough evidence to convict some of these people. But on the other hand, they think they're too dangerous. So what you do is you treat them as prisoners until the war's over, and then you either go the convention route, Geneva Convention route, or you go the domestic system. But the Guantanamo itself, they thought they could get away with it because it's not on U.S. soil, but the courts have ruled that's not true. So it was designed to be this third path where the people didn't get any evaded both the rights under the Geneva Convention or the U.S. criminal justice system. So this is sort of another area. And even if you have a military tribunal, if there's any justification for it at all, it's that the civilian court system is broken down because the war is right on your soil, and therefore, there's a battle going on right as there was in the Civil War. You can make the best case for military tribunals in the Civil War, but Lincoln used them not in the area of the battle, but elsewhere. So I think even Lincoln was using these unconstitutionally. And just because we have precedent for it, that doesn't mean we shouldn't follow the Constitution and reverse the bad precedent that we set at some point. And I think that was probably beginning in the Civil War, and as you point out, the World Wars. But we've really got to get Gitmo closed, I think, because it's not, and not for the reason that it hurts our image abroad. That's probably bad enough, but I think it hurts the Constitution. If the military is fighting to uphold the Constitution and our way of governing, that goes to the heart of supreme government power is often in many countries dictated through kangaroo courts and that sort of thing. Look at Egypt. Their elected president was shanghaied and is being subjected to unfair court proceedings. Now, you may not like him because he's an Islamist, but that's the way things are done overseas. That's not how they're supposed to be done in the United States.
Well, the Constitution guarantees you a right to jury by your peers. Who are these enemy combatants' peers?
Well,
are they entitled to a jury trial by their peers? How do you do this?
Yes, they are.
Well, who are their peers?
One of the reasons that you have jury trials is because the government can make mistakes, even on heinous crimes such as terrorism. They can do that. They've already made mistakes. Richard Jewell at the Olympic bombing, he didn't do it. They later convicted some other guy. This anthrax guy, they rounded up the wrong scientists, and then they they were pursuing another scientist and he committed suicide. But some people say, some of the scientists that work with him don't think he did it either. So the government makes mistakes all the time.
Of course, but this is the army in a foreign battlefield picking guys up who are presumably shooting at them. How do you make mistakes there?
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was not on a foreign battlefield. He did his dirty deed right here in the U.S. And therefore see, that's the other thing is when you try these people by a military tribunal, you're treating them as warriors. These people are not warriors. The 9/11 people weren't warriors. You can call the Taliban people warriors. I guess they're trying to, fight on their own soil. But Al-Qaeda are just international criminals, right? And that's why they need to be tried in a criminal court.
Perhaps.
It's two different distinctions. Many of these people in Guantanamo were picked up on the Afghan battlefield. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the other Al-Qaeda people are a little bit different there. But
they're in a different class, but
yes,
you could argue either way.
It's a very important distinction because these people are criminals. They're not warriors.
Well, that kind of was argued during the election. I think you could argue it either way. But doing it in Midtown Manhattan, one of the things about Gitmo is it's like Alcatraz, It's economically unfeasible. It's become a really major cost boondoggle, hundreds of millions of dollars to house just relatively few people here. Doesn't make any sense economically.
Yeah, there's 149 prisoners for this. That's an excellent point. There's 149 prisoners in this big complex because a lot of them have been repatriated. And half of those people there are scheduled for repatriation to their home countries, but Congress won't let the president do that. Now, the other 70 some odd, then you have a problem. What do you do with them? And that's what I think that's one of the factors here in this release, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the rapists that finish out their sentences in prison, and they're going to go rape again. So you got to figure out how to hold them, even though they've finished their term. And what do you do with them? And I guess that's the problem. And somehow you got to figure out another way of doing it. So not an easy situation to deal with, but this certainly was not the right way, as the president is finding out now, because I think the majority of the population is outraged by it. And, it's definitely the military is none too happy with him. And the Congress is up in arms, even his own party, right?
Yeah, people in his own party. I'm not sure the military is completely against him. There are pockets of the military who don't like it, but there's other pockets of the military who said, well, if you undermine the principle that we try to bring home, all of our fighters, that's a tremendous morale booster when you're out fighting, because if you get captured or something, that the U.S. military is trying to bring you home. So some of the people in the military defend that principle, avidly, and some don't. Some think, of course, the people in his unit may have some cause for discomfort since they feel that they lost people looking for him. Although I think that claim has been disputed, that these people were killed actually looking for him. So I think that's why you really need to. And the other thing that the allegation that he was helping the Taliban, I think that's a bit shaky too. I think that's why you need an investigation. Now that they'll bring him home and do an investigation. I think we also need to recall that he spent 5 hard years in Taliban captivity, and so you might have a situation. Judges in civilian courts will say, well, yeah, you did this, but time served. You've already put in your time. We'll see if that happens. I don't know. But that would be an issue as well, I think. But an investigation needs to be done more dispassionately than, people yelping in the media about people dying as a result of looking for him and that sort of thing. I mean, I think, already the criticism is changing. And there are many congressmen on the Republican side who are avidly wanting to swap for him, and now they're not. So they've reversed positions. So there's a certain amount of hypocrisy on both sides of the political aisle over this one. Everyone's sort of posturing. That's why you need a dispassionate investigation of the whole matter.
For sure. Well, 5 years with the Taliban, no matter what, is no picnic. So, Ivan, just tell us where we find your work.
www.independent.org. And I have a book on this subject. It's called The Failure of Counterinsurgency, Why Hearts and Minds are Seldom Won.
And obviously a link will be in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. Ivan, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Kerry. Appreciate it.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.